can I get a mic or a mic and a half? That the source owe me. Shout out to the editor staff. Yeah, I'm all grown, so much better with math. I need a spread in the Forbes, taking the Benjamin bath. Yeah, I'm serving this track like Steffi Graf. Yeah, Roger Federer, there's no competitor.
Urban Tennis, episode 23. Stand by me. Welcome back, everyone, to the Urban Tennis Podcast. I'm your host, joined by my co-host.
How do you do?
Pretty good. We're back after the Monte Carlo Masters have finished. We'll be looking at that in depth, obviously, the All-Swiss affair. We're going to take a look at the Fed Cup action this week. We have a finals matchup that looks very intriguing. We're going to talk about the ATP taking a tournament to Tel Aviv. And we're going to talk about basically a tennis birth year argument. So which year we think has the best tennis players or has produced the best tennis players. So if you're ready, let's get started with episode 23.
In the first All-Swiss final since 2000, Stanislav Wawrinka defeated Roger Federer in a thrilling 3 sets in Monte Carlo. And this All-Swiss final just caps off a fantastic month of Swiss tennis. So I'm going to bring in my co-host here and share exactly what happened with Switzerland for this month.
It's been quite an incredible year, but especially this month. You had early this month, obviously the Swiss team led by Wawrinka and Federer clinching a berth in the Davis Cup semifinals. You've had Belinda Bencic, the 17-year-old Swiss youngster on the WTA Tour, reaching the semis at Charleston. And now you have Stan Wawrinka winning his first Masters title against his friend, against somebody who was also looking for the first Monte Carlo title. So really, you couldn't lose either way. But I don't know what you can say right now. You know, Swiss tennis has been so graced with big stars since 1997, since Martina Hingis erupted, all the way till 2014. And once again, we just see how this tiny nation can produce such great tennis stars. It's incredible.
Now, to take a little bit bigger perspective, do you think there's any reason for this, or is it just, dumb luck, really, for lack of a better term?
Well, the reasons, like Stan Wawrinka, we talked about it in great depth and at the Australian Open, was that, he's been such a great top 20 kind of guy anyway. He's been so obviously overshadowed by Roger Federer and his incredible achievements that, in the end, Wawrinka had already lost 2 Masters finals, so it's not a surprise he was able to reach this point and win a Masters title. Obviously, the way he did it after a Grand Slam is not typical, but this has not really been the typical year, okay? We have now Wawrinka and Federer basically assuming the top 2 spots in the race to London. And who would have thought that, especially with the other 2 guys and what happened to them this week?
Yeah, definitely. How many, Rafa Nadal won 4 years in a row or something? So him losing
8 years in a row.
Okay. So let's take that number and double it. So Nadal losing was a big enough factor, and then we also had a big news coming from the Djokovic camp. Djokovic, after his loss to Federer, said he has a wrist injury and he's not really sure when he's going to come back. I think he said anywhere from 2 weeks up until 6 or 7 weeks or something. But I think most tennis fans are hoping he'll be back by Madrid. So I'm gonna ask the question: What's the bigger concern right now? Nadal's mental game or Novak's wrist?
I'm going to side with Rafa's mental game because, obviously he's had such a great streak on clay. Of course, the greatest player on clay, maybe aside from Borg. And the fact that he won this tournament 8 times, lost last year in the final, but to lose to David Ferrer for the first time in 10 years on clay is obviously surprising. The way he lost in Miami, a lot of people are considering that this is sort of that mental anguish he has from the Australian Open loss, where he's not totally sharp yet, or if he is sharp physically, he's not mentally sharp. And we do see this from Nadal. If we consider 2013 to be a great year, and I think it is, Nadal usually doesn't follow up great years with other great years. he's going to have a very good year. He always has very good years. I think whenever you win a Grand Slam and win the 7 to 8 titles that Nadal does. But the fact is still to be seen, can he follow it up with a great year? Can he win 2 slams this year? That's seeming to be unlikely this year. What about you?
Yeah, that's the reason why I'm going to say Novak's wrist injury. I think this year he's looking for the French Open. If he has any trouble at the French Open, even facing off against a Nadal who may be a little bit off at this point or maybe looking slightly off, it's still Nadal at the French Open. And we saw him last year. Nadal, Djokovic semifinal where Nadal was playing like a beast throughout 2013, where he was able to take him to 5 right up against that edge. I think if he isn't able to repeat that type of performance and finally capture that French Open that he's always wanted, I think it'd be disappointment if it's because of this wrist injury.
Yeah, I'm still wait and see with this injury. I totally expect Novak to play in Madrid. If he doesn't play in Madrid, then I pay attention. But I just think this is a player, suffered a bad loss to Roger. Novak's record against Roger is not good, even late Roger. I just think he's sort of kind of said, okay, I'm just going to take a couple of weeks off. If I'm rusty in Madrid, fine. I don't think it's a big concern right now. But if he doesn't play Madrid, then I'm paying attention. Okay, the women's side of pro tennis this weekend was the Fed Cup. And Fed Cup works basically in a couple of tiers. We had, obviously, the semifinals, but then we had a lot of play-ins for World Group. So let's start with the semis. We had the Czech Republic beating Italy in Czech Republic 4-1. Obviously, that team led by Petra Kvitova and Lucy Savarova. And then the Aussies losing at home to the Germans, led by Andrea Petkovic and Angelique Kerber, and the newly revitalized Andrea Petkovic. So obviously Germany, who we've talked about in the past, and obviously a lot has been written, is that this generation, this cohort of players had such high expectations put on them very early, but injuries or not meeting the high standard sets have kept them from this. But now they're on the verge. They're in the finals against the Czechs. Obviously, Kerber is the highest ranked player, but Andrea Petkovic has proven, at least this weekend, that she is going to play a pivotal role in any success Germany has. So do you think it's that simple, that Petkovic's return to form and return to health has been the key this year to get Germany back to where many expected they would be many years ago and for many years?
Yes, because I think it was like 2013, 2012, and even a bit of 2011. We didn't see the Petkovic we saw before that, and now we're seeing that Petkovic again. That's a big boost for the women's game, and of course Germany itself. Petkovic has made a very strong return this year, and I think it's like a return that I think a lot of players who may be a little bit on the outs right now, they hope to emulate in the future, that the type of return that Petkovic has made.
And just imagine the depth she adds to the German Fed Cup team. We didn't have Sabine Lisicki here, so if you have Lisicki on form, if you have Petkovic on form, if you have Kerber on form, that's going to be a lot to handle for the Czech Republic team. It's going to be somebody like Lucy Savarova is going to have to play out of her mind almost to keep them in it. So if you're a German fan, this may be the year that you kind of break that curse and you finally win one of these Fed Cups. Now, let's talk about Poland and Canada especially. Poland, obviously led by Aggie Radwanska. They've come out of the European zones all the way to the World Group. Canada, led by Genie Bouchard, is into the World Group. Both of these countries have really relished in a lot of instant success. The last couple of years, they're just progressing, moving on up. Do you think that these countries, especially Poland, Canada, and other first-timers, will add that kind of energy that the Fed Cup needs and kind of a shot in the arm for the countries that, kind of take it for granted? Looking at you, U.S., who suffered a pretty bad loss to France and now will be in World Group 2 next year?
Yeah, I think anytime a new country enters the Fed Cup, that country is suddenly like familiarized with the Fed Cup. I mean, we saw it here in Canada when last year they highlighted the Davis Cup team and their rise. This year we saw a lot of the television networks highlight the Fed Cup team and their rise. So as a result, you saw, of course, Genie Bouchard was highlighted after a run in the Australian Open, but the team as a whole was highlighted that how much depth they had. And I think when that happens in a lot of first-time countries, that raises the level of the competition in the tournament. And as a result, a lot of these established countries are forced to raise their game if they want to stay in these world groups.
And for Poland, it's nice to see Aga Radwanska, obviously ranked third in the world. Next year, she'll have an opportunity to, advance Poland further. And it's always good when you have the top players playing in Fed Cup or playing in Davis Cup. Okay? The ATP announced this week that their St. Petersburg ATP 250 tournament would move to Tel Aviv, Israel, in September. Now, Israel hasn't hosted an ATP event, to my knowledge, and maybe Israel and its players have been more noteworthy for, I guess, the exclusions they've felt. The 2009 UAE non-visa to Shahar Peer, a female player from Israel. Now, do you feel that knowing that situation, will there be any ramifications on this tournament? And has the climate, either among the tennis associations or the political climate, changed to such that this will not be a concern, say, in Tel Aviv?
I'm not by no means a political expert, but I think the only reason it won't be a concern is because, we don't have I think Shahar Peer was in the top 20 at that point, so we don't have a player like that on the ATP from countries that are traditionally in dispute with Israel playing on the tour. So that conflict probably won't happen even at a 250 event like that will be in Tel Aviv. So I think there's still a ways to go, but I think fortunately this year, in a way that they want to bring tennis to Israel, it won't necessarily happen because just the way the players are.
Yeah, that's true. It's definitely not the situation we had with Pierre, who was a very notable, visible player and who was kept out. Now, but just because the current situation doesn't adhere to it, but do you think the ATP should have strict guidelines for any tournament in terms of allowing players? Because I feel like the WTA kind of dropped the ball last time. So should there be a plain written out kind of guideline for the ATP on certain issues such as this?
Yeah, I think there should be. I know this is a very complicated political issue, but you also have to realize is that when you're hosting the events that are going to welcome the world, you have to acclimate the way the world does things. And for example, in 2009, UAE is a country that prides itself on a lot of foreign investment, but a lot of its foreign investment comes from countries that generally do recognize the existence of Israel. So you can't necessarily cooperate with those countries and then all of a sudden say that, oh no, we're not going to allow this. We're not going to allow an Israeli player to play in a tennis tournament that we say is going to host the world. So you kind of have to. I think the ATP should come down hard if a situation comes up.
Obviously, the complexity of the issue, we can't do it justice in the couple of minutes we have, but hopefully we'll be paying attention in September and years from now to see the success and see if there is no controversies in Tel Aviv.
All right, moving on to a bit of a lighter topic. A bit is a euphemism. Ben Rotherberg of the No Challenges Remaining podcast and contributor to the Washington Post and New York Times wished Maria Sharapova a happy 27th birthday. So Sharapova turning 27 means that she was born in 1987. I'm going to share some personal information. A date of birth shared by somebody that I know. That's all I'll say. Yes. The point being that is 1987 the greatest tennis cohort, like Rotherberg claims?
Yeah, Rotherberg brings up the example that you have Sharapova, you have Novak Djokovic, you have Andy Murray, who are all turning 27 this year and who share the 1987 vintage. And he feels that there's not a better year. So I think of recent years, there's not many you can argue that you have multiple slam winners in each of them. You add in someone like Anna Ivanovic, who's been number one and who has a Grand Slam. But obviously, you can't be short-sighted. So I went in and did some research and I kind of pulled out some other interesting years. 1956, I think, is notable because Bjorn Borg and Martina Navratilova were born. So you have possibly the greatest sensation ever in men's tennis in Bjorn Borg, and arguably the greatest women's player of all time. Obviously the most titled women's player of all time, Martina Navratilova. You have 1971, Pete Sampras, obviously 14-time champion. Arantxa Sanchez Vicario, 4-time Grand Slam champion from Spain, and Todd Woodbridge, double specialist. And then obviously I think the one we probably going to debate the most is 1981, when you have Roger Federer, Serena Williams, and if you want to throw in Lleyton Hewitt. So obviously,
he was a number one seed,
a number one player, obviously.
Yeah.
So based on that, I think 1981 has the edge. Do you disagree with that?
No, but I guess it also has to do with the bias of seeing these players in action. If you look back at it, it's going to be hard to compete with 56 as well, because Borg at one point had the most singles titles in Grand Slams, and then so did Navratilova. So you can't really say the same thing about 81, because Serena Williams hasn't had that point yet where she had the overall Grand Slam lead.
Yeah, no, it's definitely 56. I think 87 is still more of a work in progress. I think the only person you could put close to a top 10 player is Djokovic, but while the 81 and 56, you have, these are top 5 players in both categories, women's and men's. So I think in a couple of years, you're probably going to need Sharapova to do still, so, get to 7 or 8 slams, which doesn't seem likely anymore with her problems. But obviously Murray needs to win more, Djokovic needs to win more. So I think maybe the argument is 56 or 81 right now instead of 87, but maybe the depth of 87 is something that we're going to be impressed by years from now.
Yeah. Did you also have any other years you want to note out that obviously may not compare to these years, but are still years that are... How about that? You also, not necessarily years, but there was an interesting cohort you had noted.
Oh, yeah. Just the fact that I think Steffi Graf, Andre Agassi, and Pete Sampras were all born within about 18 to 19 months of each other. So if they were born in 1 year, that would have been obviously the greatest year ever, just by that. Other years, I noted 1980, obviously Martina Hingis and Venus Williams, 2 legends in their own right. 76, if you're American, Capriati, Davenport. There's other years, but usually I think 81 and 56 are probably at the top right now in terms of top talent. But if you're looking at depth, it might be 87. Okay, we're almost nearing the end of episode 23, but like always, we like to end with certain games. This week we'll have a game of challenges, which we basically shout out, challenge, put pressure on anything in the tennis world, whether it be players, tournaments, fans, coaches, umpires, anything goes. So I'm going to start with my first challenge. And I challenge all of you, the listeners, the readers, to once again pay close attention to the Bryans, who this week in Monte Carlo won their 100th doubles title. The first team ever to do that, the first players ever to do that. So when you get a chance, hit up their Wikipedia page, go to their ATP World Tour profile, and just look at the history and look at the tournaments they've won. It's an impressive career that doesn't seem to be anywhere near the end.
All right. And my challenge goes out to a player on the WTA Tour, which we haven't talked about for a while because she hasn't accomplished that much this year. And her name is Victoria Azarenka. Azarenka needs to step up her game if she wants to add more to her slams total and eventually take over the number 1 seed. We are seeing this year that Serena Williams is not playing at that peak level that she was last year. So it's a prime opportunity for any player to come up and grab that brass ring.
That's a good one. Azarenka has been MIA for a while now. My final challenge will go out to Thomas Berdych. Supposedly he was getting a little, ribbing for his H&M clothing choices in Monte Carlo, but I'm saying to Thomas Berdych, be you, Thomas Berdych. You are a great personality, whether it be on your social media channels or whether it be in your partnership within H&M. It kind of makes you stand out amongst those other 5 or 6 players in the top 10. So Berdych, H&M, I think it's a good pairing. Okay? Moving on to our social media highlight of the week.
So this week's social media highlight of the week comes from one of the more notorious tennis accounts known as PseudoFed. PseudoFed is a parody account of Roger Federer. And just today, he said, Stanford, don't say I never give you anything. Hashtag Happy Easter. To which Wawrinka replied, ha 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 ha. So it's a good fun moment for this Easter Sunday and shows that good amount of camaraderie, even when he's interacting with his fake Swedish friend. Swiss friend.
It's kind of amazing how much people interact with PseudoFed. You should just check it out. Carlos Moya recently did it. Darren Cahill. So a lot of people love the PseudoFed. Thanks for listening to this edition. You can find us on the SoundCloud link. Obviously, the YouTube page, Urban Tennis. You can read more on the blog, urbantennis.wordpress.com. And once again, this is episode 23, Stand By Me.
And the land is dark, and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. Oh, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by